Clara Bennett moved slowly through her sunlit apartment, her hands instinctively cradling the curve of her swollen belly. At 8 months pregnant, every step had to be measured, every movement deliberate, as her high-risk pregnancy demanded vigilance. She had spent countless hours reading about nutrition, practicing prenatal exercises, and attending every doctor's appointment on time. Her home was meticulously organized, from neatly folded baby clothes to a color-coded calendar marking her prenatal visits and anticipated delivery dates. She imagined the soft cries of her baby, the warmth of holding a newborn against her chest, and the life she had dreamed of creating with her husband. Excitement bubbled inside her, mingled with a quiet, anxious hope that everything would go smoothly. Yet, despite the care she took, Clara couldn't ignore the subtle changes in William Carter, her husband. Once a supportive partner, he had grown increasingly distant. He arrived late to appointments, distracted and preoccupied, often checking his phone or excusing himself for urgent calls that seemed to last far longer than necessary. His smiles had become rare, his compliments perfunctory, and the gentle touches she once cherished had dwindled to brief, transactional gestures. Clara had tried to reason with herself, perhaps work was stressful, perhaps he was just tired, but a gnawing unease lingered. Even in the smallest moments, his priorities were shifting. William seemed more absorbed with social appearances, exclusive parties, and business ventures that demanded flashy displays of wealth. The glimmer of status in his eyes, the preoccupation with who saw him and what they thought, left Clara feeling invisible in her own home. She still loved him and wanted to believe that he cared, that he would protect and support both her and their unborn child. But beneath her hope was a quiet fear, a growing suspicion that the man she had married might no longer be the one standing beside her, ready to face the challenges of bringing new life into the world. The unease whispered constantly that one day, his obsession with image and luxury could come at a cost neither of them could afford. Clara sat on the edge of the couch, her hand pressed against her lower abdomen as a sharp, stabbing pain coursed through her body. Her heart raced, and a sudden dizziness made her vision blur. She noticed a small, frightening trickle of blood and felt her stomach tighten with panic. This was different from the usual aches and discomforts of pregnancy. This felt urgent, dangerous, a warning that something was terribly wrong. She tried to steady herself, taking shallow breaths, but the fear was mounting. Her unborn baby's safety was paramount, and the realization that she could be in serious danger sent a wave of cold anxiety through her. Shakily, Clara grabbed her phone and dialed William's number. When he answered, she tried to keep her voice calm, though it trembled. "William. I'm bleeding. I feel dizzy, and the pain is sharp. I think something's wrong." On the other end of the line, William's tone was dismissive, even annoyed. "Clara, it's probably just normal pregnancy stress. You always worry too much. Don't make a scene over nothing." "But, it hurts, and the bleeding," Clara stammered, her panic rising as another wave of dizziness made her knees wobble. "Listen, I'm busy. It's fine. Sit down, drink some water, and don't overthink it. Everything will be okay," he interrupted sharply, his words cutting through her fear with the coldness of indifference. The call ended abruptly, leaving Clara clutching the phone in silence. She felt her pulse spike, fear now twisting into helplessness. The usual trust she had in her husband evaporated in that instant. Alone in the apartment, the pain intensified, and the blood continued to seep, a stark reminder that her body was in crisis. Every instinct screamed that she couldn't wait, that the situation was dire. Tears pricked her eyes as she realized she could not depend on William to protect her or their unborn child, and that she might have to act on her own to survive this harrowing night. William Carter sat in his glass-walled office, the city lights twinkling below him like a playground for the rich and powerful. His attention was entirely on the screen in front of him, contracts, stock reports, and invitations to exclusive galas that promised more influence and prestige. The soft ping of Clara's texts went ignored, each notification a minor irritant that interrupted his carefully curated world of wealth and social display. The thought of her discomfort, her bleeding, or her rising panic never truly crossed his mind. In his universe, appearances and profits always took precedence over family obligations. Weeks earlier, William had made a calculated decision regarding Clara's prenatal care. Rather than ensure full insurance coverage for her high-risk pregnancy, he had restricted access, claiming it was an unnecessary expense. Every consultation, every specialized test, and every emergency possibility that required immediate care had become a potential liability he preferred to avoid. He justified it to himself as financial prudence, but underneath was a cold indifference to the vulnerability of his pregnant wife. At the same time, William's calendar was overbooked with parties, networking dinners, and high-profile events designed to flaunt his success. Sienna Vale, his glamorous and manipulative mistress, often accompanied him, her presence a constant reminder of the selfish life he prioritized over his family. Their laughter and whispered plans for the future echoed through luxury venues, completely disconnected from the world Clara inhabited. Back at home, Clara's anxiety grew with each pang of pain and flicker of dizziness. She sensed the widening chasm between them, the invisible barrier of William's obsession with wealth and social prestige. Every unanswered call, every ignored text, reinforced the cruel reality that she was utterly alone in facing a dangerous pregnancy. His arrogance and lack of empathy made her heart pound not just from physical discomfort but from fear. She was painfully aware that, if she was to survive and protect her unborn child, she could not depend on the man she once loved. Her strength and courage would have to come from within. Clara gasped for breath as another sharp pain stabbed through her lower abdomen, sending her knees buckling beneath her. Blood stained her nightgown, and a wave of dizziness made the room spin violently. Her vision blurred, and she sank onto the carpet, trembling with exhaustion and fear. The apartment, once a place of safety, now felt like a cage, the walls closing in around her. Her heart raced, each beat a frantic reminder that her unborn child depended on her survival. She tried to call William again, but the phone slipped from her numb fingers. Her body refused to cooperate, muscles weak and unresponsive. Tears stung her eyes as panic clawed at her chest. She realized, with a sinking terror, that no help would come from the man she trusted most. She was utterly alone. For a moment, despair threatened to overwhelm her, but a primal instinct surged through her, a fierce, unyielding determination to protect her baby at all costs. With effort that felt like climbing a mountain, Clara forced herself onto all fours. Pain radiated through her torso, each movement triggering nausea and spasms, but she inched forward, hand over hand, dragging herself toward the front door. Every inch of progress was agony, her skin slick with sweat and tinged with blood. She whispered prayers under her breath, her voice barely audible, urging her body to hold on, to endure, to survive. The distance seemed endless, the apartment a labyrinth of obstacles. She stumbled over rugs, pressed against walls for balance, and paused when dizziness threatened to make her collapse entirely. Each time, she reminded herself that stopping was not an option, she had to make it to the hospital. Her vision tunneled as adrenaline and fear pushed her forward. The doorknob loomed ahead like a beacon of hope. Finally, she reached the door, her strength waning, her limbs trembling violently. She fumbled with the lock, every second a fight against unconsciousness. With one last surge of determination, she managed to push it open and feel the cool night air brush her face. Outside, the city lights seemed impossibly bright, a lifeline in the darkness. Crawling forward, she whispered through clenched teeth, "I have to make it. For my baby. I have to make it." Clara's hands scraped against the hardwood floor as she inched forward, each movement sending sharp jolts of pain through her abdomen. Blood smeared beneath her palms, slick and warm, a constant reminder of the danger pressing down on her and her unborn child. Her breaths came in short, ragged gasps, chest heaving with exhaustion, but stopping was not an option. Every fiber of her being screamed to keep moving, to survive, to protect the life she carried. She felt as if the world had narrowed to this one mission, crawling forward. The familiar layout of her apartment blurred as her vision swam, rugs became obstacles, furniture loomed like insurmountable walls, and the cool air of the hallway brought both relief and vertigo. Her mind raced, fear intertwining with determination. "Come on, Clara. You can do this. Just a little farther. You have to make it for him, for the baby." Each push forward burned her muscles, weak from weeks of strain and now taxed beyond endurance. Her fingers ached, scraped, and bled, but she ignored the pain. The dizziness made her vision tilt, the edges of her world darkening, yet she forced her head up, blinking rapidly to focus on the tiny sliver of light at the end of the hall, the door to freedom, to help, to survival. The thought of William's absence surged through her mind, anger mingling with despair. How could he leave me like this? How could he care more about appearances than the life we created? The betrayal fueled her determination, pushing her forward even when her body begged her to collapse. Reaching the doorway, Clara struggled to drag herself over the threshold, each movement an agonizing test of willpower. The driveway stretched ahead, long and daunting, yet illuminated by the faint glow of streetlights. Her body quivered violently, blood soaking her gown, dizziness threatening to topple her at every step. She whispered encouraging words to herself, tiny mantras that became lifelines. I have to make it. I can't fail him. And so she moved, inch by agonizing inch, aware that the night held both peril and hope. Each heartbeat felt like a countdown, each movement a gamble against time. The hospital was out there somewhere, salvation just beyond the night, but every second felt like an eternity. Clara's will burned brighter than her fear, carrying her forward through pain, uncertainty, and the shadow of almost certain tragedy. From her apartment window across the street, Mrs. Delaney noticed something that made her heart stop. A figure in a blood-stained nightgown was crawling slowly across the driveway of the building next door. At first, she thought it might be a trick of the dim porch light or a shadow distorted by motion, but as she focused, the scene became horrifyingly clear. Clara Bennett, heavily pregnant, was struggling, weak and desperate, inching toward the street. Mrs. Delaney's instincts kicked in immediately. She grabbed her phone, her hands trembling as she dialed 911. Please, someone help. My neighbor, she's crawling. She's bleeding and pregnant. Her voice shook, urgency and fear seeping through every word. The operator's calm but rapid instructions guided her to stay on the line while help was dispatched. Mrs. Delaney ran outside, waving frantically, trying to reach Clara, but the distance and Clara's compromised state made verbal reassurance nearly impossible. Paramedics were dispatched within minutes, sirens cutting through the night as they sped toward the apartment complex. Inside the ambulance, they reviewed the notes from the call. A heavily pregnant woman, bleeding, collapsed outside her home, requiring immediate life-saving intervention. Every second mattered. Outside, Clara's crawl had slowed, her strength was fading, dizziness threatening to topple her entirely. Her hand touched the cool concrete of the driveway, but the next inch forward required all of her remaining willpower. The flashing lights of the ambulance reflected in her watery eyes, offering a fragile glimmer of hope. Paramedics arrived and quickly assessed the situation. One knelt beside Clara, gently lifting her, supporting her weight, while another called for the stretcher and additional medical supplies. With careful but urgent movements, they secured her and stabilized her as best they could, while adrenaline and determination propelled them toward the ambulance. Clara's breathing was shallow, her pulse erratic, but she clung to the hope that someone had finally arrived in time to save both her and her unborn child. William Carter's phone buzzed incessantly, each notification a sharp reminder that something urgent was happening at home. He glanced down at the screen, seeing alerts about Clara's location and an emergency 911 call. His brow furrowed, not with concern, but with annoyance. The night was meant for Sienna Vale, his glamorous mistress, and he had spent hours preparing the perfect evening, a rooftop party, champagne flowing, laughter carefully curated for social media. The interruption felt intolerable. Sienna leaned against him, her eyes scanning the glittering crowd, expecting charm and attention. "Are you coming or not?" she asked, voice dripping with impatience. William quickly silenced the buzzing phone, slipping it into his pocket. "It's nothing. Clara's fine. Just overreacting, you know how pregnant women get," he muttered, more to convince himself than Sienna. As the alerts continued, missed calls, location pings, and even snippets of Clara's trembling text messages, William's irritation mounted. Each notification pulled him momentarily from the party's carefully constructed glamour, but he shrugged them off, prioritizing appearances over life. "Can you believe she's trying to ruin tonight?" he whispered, a smirk forming as Sienna laughed in agreement. Pathetic. Even when a friend discreetly mentioned that an ambulance had been spotted near his building, William's only thought was the potential gossip and damage to his social image. The notion that his pregnant wife might be fighting for her life barely registered. Every second he delayed, every decision he made to ignore the alerts, intensified the stakes, not just for Clara, but for the unborn child who depended entirely on her survival. In that moment, William's selfishness became unmistakable. He was not merely inattentive, he was actively choosing indulgence, choosing the party, and choosing Sienna over the life of his family. His arrogance and callousness set the stage for consequences that would not only haunt him but also reveal the stark contrast between his self-absorbed world and the courage, determination, and desperation of the woman he had vowed to protect. The ambulance screeched to a halt outside the apartment complex, its red lights cutting through the darkness like urgent warnings. Paramedics James and Rita leapt out, their boots pounding on the pavement as they raced toward Clara. The sight that met them stole their breath, a heavily pregnant woman, blood-soaked, trembling on the driveway, every movement an agonizing struggle. James knelt beside her immediately, assessing her pulse and consciousness, while Rita moved to secure a stretcher. Time was their enemy, and every second counted. "Ma'am, can you hear me? My name's James. We're here to help." "Stay with me, okay," he said, his voice calm but commanding, as he gently placed a hand under her shoulder to lift her. Clara's eyes fluttered weakly, recognition and fear mingling in their gaze. Blood was pooling beneath her, her face pale and clammy, and every shallow breath she took seemed to sap her strength further. Rita quickly attached in four, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "We need to stabilize her and control the bleeding before we move. This is critical. Any delay could be fatal for her and the baby," she instructed, keeping her eyes locked on Clara's rapidly fading vitals. James applied gentle pressure to the bleeding areas, whispering encouragement as he worked. "You're doing great, Clara. Keep fighting. We've got you. You're not alone." Each word was a lifeline, a tether to consciousness as Clara's body trembled violently and her vision swam. The struggle to move her to the stretcher was intense, her body refused to cooperate, weak and unresponsive from blood loss and exhaustion. With coordinated precision, the paramedics lifted her, balancing the need for care with the urgency of speed. Every jolt, every bump in the driveway, was a threat to her fragile state. Inside the ambulance, monitors beeped insistently, for drips flowed, and James and Rita worked seamlessly to maintain her vitals while racing through the city streets. Clara's consciousness flickered in and out, her fingers curling weakly around the paramedic's gloved hands. "You're going to make it," James assured her, his voice firm. "We're taking you to the hospital now. Hang on, we've got you." Time stretched like a taut wire, every second a battle against death. The ambulance surged forward, lights flashing, sirens wailing, as Clara's life, and the life of her unborn child, hung in precarious balance between despair and the fragile hope of survival. The emergency room erupted into controlled chaos as Clara was wheeled through the double doors. Nurses and doctors moved with practiced urgency, voices clipped and precise, each instruction cutting through the cacophony of beeping monitors and hurried footsteps. Clara's eyes fluttered weakly, panic and relief intermingling as she glimpsed the bright hospital lights and the flurry of white coats surrounding her. "Vitals," shouted a doctor, and a nurse immediately checked her pulse and oxygen levels. "BP is dropping, prepare for 4 fluids, stat." Another nurse stabilized her head and shoulders while an oxygen mask was gently placed over her face. Clara's hand instinctively went to her belly, fear twisting through her chest. "My baby, please, let my baby be okay," she thought, the panic in her mind threatening to overwhelm her. The lead doctor barked quick orders. "We need an ultrasound immediately, check fetal heartbeat. Prepare for potential emergency C-section. Let's move." Machines were wheeled into place, and a technician began scanning her abdomen as Clara's heart pounded, both from fear and physical strain. She tried to speak, to ask questions, but the words caught in her throat. Her body was weak, her energy spent, and every movement brought waves of pain. Hands worked efficiently around her, monitoring, stabilizing, and preparing for surgical intervention. Clara felt a strange mixture of relief and terror, relief that she was finally in capable hands, terror at the severity of the situation and what it might mean for her baby. Each beep and click of the medical equipment became a rhythm of life she clung to. "Stay with us, Clara. We're not leaving you," the lead doctor said firmly, their voice a tether to reality. Amid the flurry of urgency, Clara allowed herself a small, trembling breath, holding on to hope as skilled hands worked tirelessly to save both her life and the life of her unborn child. The nightmare that had begun at home was now in the hands of those trained to fight for survival, and every second counted. The operating room was a whirlwind of precise movements, bright lights, and urgent commands. Clara lay on the surgical table, trembling from weakness and fear, while anesthesiologists worked quickly to stabilize her. "We're moving forward with the C-section," the lead surgeon announced. Nurses prepped instruments, adjusted monitors, and spoke in clipped, urgent tones. Clara's hand instinctively went to her belly, and despite the fear coursing through her veins, a fragile hope flickered. "Please, let my baby be safe." With swift, coordinated motions, the surgeons began the procedure. Every incision, every maneuver was executed with meticulous care, the team aware that both mother and child hung in delicate balance. Clara's pulse raced, and her breaths came shallow, but she clung to consciousness, guided by the constant reassurance of the staff around her. Moments later, the first cries of a newborn pierced the room, a sound that brought tears to Clara's eyes and relief crashing over her in overwhelming waves. The baby was safe, delivered successfully, and immediately taken to the neonatal team for further care. As the medical team continued to stabilize Clara, investigators outside the hospital had already begun to piece together the sequence of events that led to this emergency. Paramedic reports, 911 logs, and witness statements painted a troubling picture. William Carter had actively blocked insurance coverage, leaving Clara vulnerable, and ignored multiple alerts about her deteriorating condition. Phone records confirmed that he had been at a party with his mistress, dismissing his wife's calls and neglecting her life-threatening situation. Legal experts began to weigh in, noting the potential criminal and civil implications of William's behavior. Negligence, deliberate obstruction of medical access, and endangerment of a dependent were serious charges, and the evidence suggested a deliberate pattern rather than a one-time lapse. Whispers of lawsuits, public scrutiny, and potential criminal investigations circulated as the truth unfolded. Clara, now recovering and watching her baby in the neonatal unit, would soon learn the full extent of William's callousness. The emotional impact of betrayal, coupled with the legal ramifications looming over him, created a tense undercurrent of suspense. Every action he had taken to prioritize selfish desires over the lives of his family was now coming under scrutiny, setting the stage for justice, accountability, and the dramatic reckoning that awaited him. Clara's eyelids fluttered open, heavy with exhaustion, as the sterile white light of the hospital room greeted her. The steady beep of monitors and the soft hum of machines were a comforting reassurance that she was still alive. For a moment, disorientation washed over her. Where was she? Then her gaze fell on the small bassinet beside her, where the fragile form of her newborn son rested, his tiny chest rising and falling with each delicate breath. Relief and overwhelming emotion brought tears to her eyes. A nurse approached gently, checking her vitals and offering a soft smile. "You're awake, Mrs. Bennett. You and your baby are safe now." It was a close call, but the doctors acted quickly. Clara's mind reeled as the reality of the past night began to settle: the collapse, the bleeding, the agonizing crawl to reach help, and the heroic intervention of the paramedics and medical team. She tried to absorb the gravity of her survival, the precious life of her baby secured despite the harrowing ordeal. Then, as the nurse explained the timeline, the 911 text, and the emergency response, the pieces fell together. Clara's chest tightened, anger and disbelief mingling with the lingering fear. William's name, once a symbol of partnership and protection, now resonated with betrayal. His indifference, his party with Sienna, his deliberate blocking of her insurance, all of it nearly cost the life of her child. The realization struck her with a painful clarity: she had been left to fight for her own survival, and her child's safety had been secondary to his selfish desires. A surge of resolve coursed through Clara's veins, replacing panic and despair. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest, feeling her heartbeat steady as clarity and determination took root. She would not allow this betrayal to define her or dictate the future. Protecting her child, reclaiming her autonomy, and facing the consequences of William's actions became her singular focus. Fear gave way to strength, and despair transformed into a quiet, unyielding resolve. She would survive, she would fight, and she would ensure her child's life, and her own, would never again be endangered by his selfishness. Clara sat upright in her hospital bed, the soft weight of her newborn son cradled against her chest. Each tiny movement of his fingers, each fragile sigh, reminded her of the precious life she had fought so desperately to protect. The events of the past night, the collapse, the agonizing crawl to safety, and the emergency C-section, had left a permanent mark on her, both physically and emotionally. But in that quiet moment, clarity replaced fear. She could no longer remain in a marriage where her life, and the life of her child, was treated as secondary to William's arrogance and indulgence. She contacted her lawyer, her voice steady despite the lingering pain. The decision to end the marriage was no longer difficult, it was necessary. Custody of her newborn became her top priority, and she meticulously documented every detail of William's neglect and deliberate obstruction of care. Paramedic reports, hospital logs, and evidence of the deleted 911 message provided a clear record of his recklessness. Clara understood the gravity of the legal battle ahead, but she also recognized that justice was within reach. William's arrogance and selfishness, once a shield, now made him vulnerable to accountability. Meanwhile, the investigation into his actions intensified. Insurance records, communication logs, and eyewitness statements painted a damning picture of a man who had prioritized social status and a mistress's party over the life of his pregnant wife and unborn child. Legal experts predicted both civil and potential criminal consequences. The reality of the law catching up to him became a source of empowerment for Clara rather than fear. She felt a growing sense of control and agency over her own life. With her newborn safely in her arms, Clara envisioned a future unburdened by William's cruelty. She would raise her child in a home filled with love, safety, and dignity. Each small step she took, filing legal documents, consulting with doctors, and planning for her family's security, was a declaration of independence. The trauma of betrayal had forged a new strength within her. Clara's life, once dominated by fear and dependence, now opened onto a path of empowerment, resilience, and hope. She was no longer a passive victim, she was a mother, a survivor, and a woman stepping boldly into a future defined by her courage, clarity, and unwavering determination.